Now I want to talk about CO2 levels in growing rooms. CO2 is very important parameter that we constantly measuring during most of our growing process. It's important for us. It's starting to be important from recovery phase and keep its importance until the end of growing cycle. From CO2 levels will depend shape of our mushrooms and will depend our yields, etc. So it's very important to measure CO2. In reality, it's for mushroom, it's important how much oxygen they have. But because of oxygen is hardly to measure, we measure CO2. Mycelium, when it grows, constantly creates CO2, actually from oxygen that present in air. So when we close our room and seal it, for example, in an hour, content of CO2 in a room will be much higher than it was, because mycelium creates CO2 from oxygen in air. And for us to ensure that our mushrooms grows in a proper way, we need to ensure that they have enough oxygen. But because it's harder to measure oxygen, we're measuring CO2 levels, and the more CO2 in the air means the less oxygen in air. We measure CO2 in parts per million, ppm. Fresh air has 400 ppm, and in our growing room, during most of phases, we will have CO2 levels from 1000 ppm up to 15,000 ppm. This is our working range. The highest range will be when we are in the recovery stage, and during most of growing, we will keep CO2 between 1500 up to 3000 ppm. How to measure CO2 levels? For small farms, it's good to have a portative set that measures CO2. Portative device, you can see it on a picture. This device costs from 100 up to a couple of €100, and it's easily accessible. You can measure CO2 with this device. But for bigger farm, in order to have constant control over CO2 levels and be able to constantly manage CO2 levels in a room, to connect CO2 meter to our computer, we need constant measuring of CO2. Here in this farm you can see a pipe hose that situated over the mushroom bed. The closer it's to the bed, the better. Usually also you can see filters, air filters near this pipe, in order to prevent water and particles, dust, casing, soil to go to this pipe. And this pipe connected to the pump, which suck air from the room and send it to measuring device, measures CO2 levels. Because this device that measures CO2 levels is quite expensive, it's on a big farm, often we use one device for 4 or even up to 8 rooms. For this we have electric valves that open air from one room, suck air, measure CO2, another valve open and do it for another room. And we know CO2 levels once in 15 minutes, let's say. Once in 15 minutes we measure CO2 level in this room, and this is enough to know how much CO2 we have in the room and to correct supply of oxygen to this room. The only way to manage how much CO2 we have in the room is to add oxygen, so we can add fresh air from outside. We have fresh air damper, and when we need to make CO2 in a room lower, or to keep it as we need, and not let it increase because mushrooms create it, we open fresh air damper, which gives fresh air to the room, and we keep or lower our CO2 levels. I will show now in a corridor how on this farm the simple set that measures CO2 levels looks like. Here is the box where CO2 measuring device is situated. Here is a filter which removes water from air because water can damage device that measuring CO2. This is device, this is pump that suck an air. Very simple setup, and on the top here you can see boxes where valves are situated, and they switching. One valve is open in one moment of the time, and opening valves one by one, we can measure CO2 in growing rooms on this farm. Quite simple.